All right, good morning, everybody. Glad you're here. Now, here's what I want you to do. I know you've been standing just for a few minutes, but you're going to be having a seat for quite a long time, or at least about 30 minutes, you hope. So I need you to stand out of respect and for the reading and the authority of the Word of God. And here's how it's going to happen. I'm going to read the first two slides again, and then it's going to be your turn. Don't worry, I'll give you your cue. I'm first. Here we go. Jesus responding to the disciples in John 14, verse 6 says, I am the way and the truth and the life, and no one comes to the Father except through me. And then in 1 John 4, dear friends, do not believe every spirit, but test the spirits to see whether they are from God, because many false prophets have gone out into the world. Now this is where you come in on the count of three. 1, 2, 3.
This is how you can recognize the Spirit of God. Every spirit that acknowledges that Jesus Christ has come in the flesh is from God.
But every spirit that does not acknowledge Jesus is not from God. This is the spirit of the Antichrist, which you have heard is coming and even now is already in the world.
You, dear children, are from God and have overcome them, because the one who is in you is greater than the one who is in the world.
They are from the world and therefore speak from the viewpoint of the world, and the world listens to them. All right, have a seat. You did a great job. Now, we're in a series, and it's an important one. It's called Doubt. And the question is, what is doubt about? And here's what we've said that we're doing. Since last Christmas and this past Easter, when we all gathered up at Azusa Pacific University and had our Easter outreach service, a great time, we have had a lot of people come into our midst. That's why you see few empty chairs. That's why the fireside room starts to have more and more people. And there are people in our church right now that are what we have termed explorers. They've not crossed over into faith yet, but they're really exploring what this whole thing about Christianity is all about and following Jesus. Something in the Christmas or the Easter outreach resonated with them. So they thought to themselves, I think I will go and see what this is about. So in our perspective, they're kind of here, all right, and they're smiling, and God's over here in a relationship with Jesus right here. Now, they've not crossed over yet, but it's not because they don't want to. It's not because they're not seriously considering it. It's because there's a barrier between them and God. And they're thinking, you know what? If I could just get this resolved, then I would be more open to crossing over into a relationship with Jesus. But the problem is, no pastor will talk about this issue. And they're usually true. They're usually right. There are issues that we usually don't talk about on the weekend. Some people start to say, well, it's because it's a difficult one and you really don't want to face it. Well, if you know anything about me in my 4 years here, those are the exact kind of issues I want to address, because I want all of us to at least, if we reject Jesus, to do it from an informed basis, to know what he taught and to know what he's asking of us. Now, last week we talked about the barrier of science. For some people, it's like, I just can't harmonize faith and science, and until somebody addresses this issue, I can't cross over. So we addressed it last week. I cannot review that. It would take too much time, and your head would start hurting, and so would mine. And so go back and listen to that if your barrier is science. But let me tell you, what I'm going to talk about right now, in my opinion, is a far greater barrier and more common, prevalent barrier than science ever thought about being, and it's this issue right here, exclusivity. How in the world can you say that your way to God is the only way possible? And so in our world, tolerance is the highest value. And so when we're pursuing tolerance and someone comes along and says, hey, we have the way and the only way, well, I guess it's our anger up just a little bit. So there are people in our midst, and you may not be one of those. And like I said last week, this is where you start praying. If you already have all the answers to this, just pray. Pray for those, hopefully, that would cross over and that barrier would disintegrate. People ask me, Pastor Jeff, how can you possibly claim that your religion is the only true religion? How can you claim that your way is the true way to God? Now, to show the rest of us how serious this is, let me ask you a question. If you were to go out on the street today in LA, and you would ask this question, what do you believe to be the main barrier to world peace? If you were to have done that 40 years ago, some of you who are 40 years older know this to be true, the answer would have been political ideology. Russia, the Cold War, capitalism, communism. That's the burial to world peace. and all those great movies during the Cold War that came out no longer come out, and I miss that. You remember the movie 13 Days or Red Dawn or Hunt for Red October? Weren't those classics, man? I miss those. I don't miss the Cold War, but I miss the movies. But today, if you were to go out on the street and ask the same question, it would not be political ideology. Cold War, done, so to speak. It would be this. And the answer that you would receive intensified after 9/11, when people in the world saw those planes going to the Twin Towers. Here's what they say now. They took one good look at radical Islam and said, see, religion is the real culprit here, and we will never have peace on earth as long as we have religion. Especially if we have religion that is exclusive, that claims to know the only way or the true way to God. So there's a ton of books being written right now on how religion in the world is the enemy. And if we get rid of religion, we'll have world peace. Now, let's look at this, first of all, from an honest perspective. Is it true that religion has a very strong tendency to divide people? Oh, you bet your life it is. You don't even have to go overseas, just look in your own family. My mother and my father, every summer, would take us up to Washington, D.C. to visit my Aunt Brenda and my Uncle Winston. And after about the third or fourth year, I wondered why Dad continued to take the family up there, because we always left early. We always left before we said we were going to leave, because my Aunt Brenda was a militant Christian. And she believed that her way was the only way, not only Jesus the way to salvation, we're talking about little fine point doctrinal issues, all right? And she had my mother believing before we left town that my mom didn't even really know God because she didn't speak in tongues. And that my mom really didn't even know what the Bible said because she didn't read it the way she did. I mean, it was terrible. There was no love, no peace, no joy. So we always left early, and my mom would be in tears. And I learned to dislike my Aunt Brenda a lot. The point is, religion, if you're honest with yourself, and there are people in the room that are going to agree with this, has a tendency to create strife, arrogance, smugness, and can often lead to violence and oppression. It is what it is. As a matter of fact, anytime one group of people tells another group of people that we have the truth and that you're saved by following the truth, automatically there's going to be a feeling of superiority. And sooner or later, there's going to be a tendency to pull away from those people who don't have the truth, and those people are going to become unfamiliar with the other people, and you're going to start expecting the worst about the other people, and then marginalization, oppression, and dehumanization often follow. Okay, now, we all know that it's only in the area and arena of religion that these things happen. You're kidding, right? Come on. Can you say the Republicans versus the Democrats? These children do not play nicely together. I mean, you're kidding, right? The opportunity or the temptation for dehumanization, for oppression, for marginalization is only in religion. It's in every single arena of life. In politics, in social views, in economic beliefs, people get downright irate and mad at each other. I mean, look at the political world. You've seen some of these scenes where they're in Parliament and they're about to kill each other. Can you say hate and animosity and violence and hate speech? Somebody recently had a message for the Tea Party. They said, the Tea Party can go straight to hell. Is that hate speech? Are they going to be arrested, or is it only in religion? You see, the point I'm making is this is life. And if you're asking me for 1 second to believe that the potential or possibility of marginalization or oppression or dehumanization only resides in the possibility or the realm of religion, I'm going to say, you've got to be kidding. Where are you hiding? It's everywhere. But the bigger question is, once you decide, as the West has, especially America, and this is important, even if exclusivity is not an issue, you need to be aware of what's going on in America. The issue is, once you decide that religion is the biggest threat to world peace, what are you going to do? And here's what the West is doing, especially in America. They have two prevalent strategies, none of which are working because they can't work. Here's the first strategy. Let's call for a weakening of religion in hopes that one day it will disappear. Now, how many in the room have ever been shocked? Now, I don't mean shocked by something that happened. I mean 220 volts of electricity going through you. Anybody? That's pretty painful, isn't it? When I went to Zimbabwe the first time, I learned very quickly that you cannot plug an American appliance in a European outlet. Even if you twist it and it fits, it's not good to do it. And they have these little things called transformers. So you can plug your 110 hairdryer into a transformer that will transform the electricity. I think it really works the other way. 220 can become 110. What no one told me is it's probably not a good idea to get out of the shower with a towel around you, standing in a pool of water, and plug your hairdryer into one of these transformers, especially if there's wiring exposed. And I did that. And I want to tell you, back then I was 190 pounds of pure thoroughbred muscle. Okay. All right. I was a skinny kid with no muscle at all, but that's not important. So I take this hairdryer and I plug it in. Man, if you've ever had that shoot through you, how do you pick up something that I was 6'4", and about 190 pounds, and it just blew me back about 5-6 feet on the ground. My heart was beating. Lucky I wasn't killed. Now, that's shock. But let me tell you something that is shocking the West. They cannot believe, because Western intelligentsia really believed that with more and more education and progress in technological areas, that religion would simply over time die out, fade away. So you've got a whole group of people now that cannot believe that technological advances and scientific advancement did not somehow and is not eradicating religion. The opposite has happened in the last 100 years. You think about Africa for a moment. We've gone from 9% to 50%, over 50% Christian in 100 years. Korea has gone from 1% to 47% Christian. The numbers in China are staggering. So much so that they say to you and me that before we die, before this generation passes, we will have 500 million Christians in China. And that's why revivalists are saying that, man, we're going to get hit from Africa and Asia, and they're going to change America. So the Americans who once sent missionaries are now going to be the recipients of missionaries. And the faith that the African and Asian Christians have is a real faith. Have faith at all cost. So here's the thing. I'm just saying that no one with half a brain any longer says that with modern advancement in technology or education, somehow religion is going to fade. So here's what our government does. They say, since it's not going to fade, and we know it, let's not admit it, but here's what they and people like in Hollywood will do. They say, okay, then, we must start to propagate a message that will control and regulate religion. Now, does anybody find that ironic? Because if you know your history, you'll know that anytime you try to control and regulate religion, what happens to it? It explodes. It grows like crazy. In the 1940s, when the communists went into China, they kicked all the missionaries out. And they said, well, that's the last we'll hear of Christianity. And what happened? Christianity became more indigenous, more personal, more local. And it spread like wildfire. Now, here's the question before we move on. And right now you're thinking, okay, how is all this related to exclusivity? It is, but you have to let me build the stage here. Why is it that when you persecute a religion, any religion, not just Christianity, when you persecute it, it explodes? And here's the reason. Behind every religious view, there are spiritual influences. 1 John said that, the passage we first read. Dear friends, do not believe every spirit, but test the spirits to see whether they are from God. In other words, the writer of the book of John is saying your faith assumptions, your religion is not like some political ideology or political theory. There are deep spiritual influences behind a religious or spiritual view. That's why John Stott said this, you must not make the mistake of thinking that Christianity and religious views are merely intellectual or cognitive phenomenon. It's not merely an intellectual decision. Listen, there is a spiritual realm. Humans sense it and want to connect with it. And when they do connect with whatever they connect with, it goes deep into the heart and the soul. And what this passage is saying, that it is quite possible that you could fix your heart and you could start to worship something that can enslave you rather than free you. They can, instead of turning you to love and mercy, actually inspire hate that creates selfishness and self-centeredness and arrogance rather than selflessness and humility. So he says, test the spirits. Be careful what set of faith assumptions you attach your life to. Now, I like to put it like this. I've got this elephant. We're going to use him twice. Here's the first time. Or her, whichever. You'll notice that this elephant has ears. Now, when I hear people talk about religion, their logic goes like this. An elephant has ears. Pastor Jeff has ears. He must be an elephant. Because the erroneous assumption is that all religions in the world are fundamentally similar, only superficially different. And that comes from ignorance. Because as you study world religions, what you discover is the opposite. All religions are fundamentally different, only superficially similar. So the Bible says, make sure that when you attach yourself to a set of faith assumptions, that you test the spirits. Now, strategy one, we'll get back to that in a moment. Call for a weakening of religion in hopes that one day it will pass or fade away, and that's not going to happen. Strategy two, and this is the one that's predominant, and I want you to follow me here. Even if exclusivity is not a barrier, listen, it's important that you know this. Call for a religion that is confined to the private realm. Here's what Hollywood and our government right here in America, and they're passing legislation, they're saying it's okay. You can be religious, just don't bring your religious ideas into the public arena to impact governmental policy. Now, I've got this cat here. It's the animal weekend at CCV. This cat is to remind me, I'm married into a family that loves animals, and I don't like animals. I didn't say I hate them. It's not, and that sounds terrible. I would never do anything. No animals will be harmed during the preaching of this message. But I want you to know that I'm allergic to cats and dogs, and they just, I mean, you know, if you've got that kind of allergy, and if you notice those of you who have allergies, people have no sympathy for us, zero. And so my wife kind of said, well, if you marry me, you get my animals. Well, when we lived in Zimbabwe, we had 3 dogs and 3 cats, and I felt that was enough. And it was bad enough that one cat was named Eddie after Eddie Murphy. Another cat was named Eugene after a good-looking gym instructor down in the city. I mean, how does that work? And then the third cat was named Big Kitty, just because he was big. That's terrible to not give a cat a personal name, Big Kitty. So my wife got another cat, and it was about this size. This cat was the meanest little son of a gun you'd ever see. This cat would wait till I'd walk down the hallway and then come out and scratch me on the leg and then run. Ooh, I did not like this cat from the get-go. And yes, you say, Pastor Jeff, did you even try to get along with the cat? And yes, I did. I went to great lengths to try to get along with this cat. The whole 2 days that I was trying this, I would pick this cat up, and I picked this cat up to try to pet it. You know what the cat would do? Scratch me in the face or above the eye. And finally, I'd had enough. And because I'm the man of my house when my wife's away, one time she was away, and the cat scratched me, and that's it. I'd had enough, man. I picked this cat up, and I was about to smack it. It smacked me and then ran. And I chased it. Now, I'm not proud of it. And no cats will be hurt during this illustration. And so I chased after this cat, and it ran under the bed. And I looked under the bed, and that thing's back in a corner. And I want to tell you, you do not want to get a cat cornered. This little cat, I almost developed a whole new respect for it. It came out swinging with everything. This little cat, boom, 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 just hoping to land a lucky punch and escape. Well, I kind of said, wow, that cat's got some feistiness, so I kind of left the cat alone. At least that's what I told Robin when she asked me what happened to the cat. Now, here's the point of that story. The point is that I believe this is a good illustration of a last-ditch effort the government, Hollywood, and those in power are trying to exact upon religion. They know that it's not going to go away. They know that if you persecute it, it grows, even though they still make policy against it. They say, okay then, since we know it's never going to go away, here's what we're going to do. Go ahead, let 1,000 religious flowers bloom. But whatever you do, don't bring your personal set of faith values, your religion, into the context of public arena when we're talking about truth, right, wrong, and morality. Now, is there anybody else in the room that says, huh? That's a pragmatic impossibility. Now, here's the question, back to exclusivity. It's pragmatically impossible. Why? What is religion, folks? You say, it's belief in God. Hold on. Zen Buddhism is one of the world's major religions. It does not believe in God, and yet it's classified as a religion. Well, okay, Jeff, maybe not God, but it's a belief in the supernatural. Well, hold on a minute. Hinduism is one of the 5 major world religions, and it does not believe in a spiritual realm beyond the material world. And again, it's classified as a religion. Well, my goodness, Pastor Jeff, what is religion then? I'm so glad you asked. Here's what it is. It is a set of beliefs that explain what life is all about, who we are, and the most important things that human beings should spend their time doing. So, Christianity then, what is life all about? Being reconciled to God. We believe Jesus taught that we are sinners and separated from God, but He came to reconcile us. Who are we? We are people created in the image of God for His purposes. What do? We love others. We serve others. We use our gifts for a purpose greater than ourselves, and we draw people, we attempt to draw people, or to be instrumental in drawing people near to God and into eternity. That is our set of beliefs. That is our faith system. Now, however, stay with me, there are others in the world who believe that the material world is all there is. We are the result of time plus matter plus chance. That we are therefore here by accident, and that when we die, we rot in the ground, and that's it. And their view of reality, or morality rather, is that therefore, what is right while you're on the planet is to do whatever you need to do to make yourself happy. That is the meaning and purpose of life. Now, I want you to notice something. Make no mistake, that is a religion. And it's a religion because it addresses the four main questions every religion does. Origin, where did I come from? I'm here by accident. Destiny, where am I going? Back into the ground rotting. What is the meaning of life? To be happy. What is the purpose of life? What is morality? Whatever determines my happiness. What I'm simply saying is that every system of belief is a religion because it addresses the four issues of life. It has a set of faith assumptions that cannot be proven in a lab. Therefore, it is implicitly religious. Now, Pastor Jeff, plain language. Okay, here it is. Everybody has a religion. Everybody lives their lives out of what they believe about the universe, the world, humanity, purpose for existing. And even though your religion may not have a name, even though you don't really even think about it as a religion, and even though you don't go somewhere and participate in some ritualistic service, the reality is you still have a set of faith assumptions on which your entire life operates. It is a set of faith assumptions that determine how you live. Folks, nobody in the world is without religion. You believe something about meaning, destiny, origin, purpose, and that is your set of faith assumptions because you can't prove them in a scientific laboratory. Which is why Dr. Tim Keller, in his book, The Reason for God, says, think about for a moment divorce laws. Now, here's what the secular world tells the Christian. All right, as we talk about divorce, you Christians need to leave your faith assumptions at home. And let's talk about divorce from strictly a pragmatic point of view. What will work in society? Now, do you see the problem with that? The problem is, what will work in society will depend on what you think is the purpose of marriage. And what is the purpose of marriage will be determined by your religious views, by what you believe about human nature and the purpose of life, origin and destiny. Now, let me give you an example. Let's say you're from the viewpoint of Western secularism. Then you believe that the needs of the one outweigh the needs of the group, that the needs of the individual are more important than the needs of the family, and that the real purpose of marriage then is for you to be happy and fulfilled as an individual person. And if that's what you believe the purpose of marriage is, notice that is a set of faith assumptions that you cannot prove in a laboratory, then you're going to make divorce easy. So if you're not happy in this one, just try another one. If you're not happy there, try another one. Now, if you're from a more traditional society and you're talking about marriage and divorce, you believe that the family is more important than the individual. That the purpose of marriage is not only for happiness, sure it is, but it's also for creating a safe and secure environment in which to raise up children, to nurture them, for the purpose of the extended family, and for the purpose or the greater good of society as a whole. So that society doesn't break down, you believe the family is more important than the individual. And if that's what you believe, you will make divorce more difficult. Now here's the point. Both positions on divorce come from religious faith assumptions. What you believe about where you're from and where you're going and morality and right and wrong and origin. Here's what I'm trying to say. I've yet to meet a person, and I'd love to have these conversations when somebody says, I'm not religious, and I'll talk to them, and after an hour they'll say, well, maybe I am religious. Because religion just means a set of faith assumptions that dictate origin, meaning, morality, and destiny. And everybody has that. Therefore, everybody on the planet is religious. There's no such thing as an unreligious person, not even an atheist. Because an atheist says his faith assumptions are origin, we're here by accident, there is no meaning, there is no destiny, and morality, just do what makes you happy. So every decision you make in your life flows out of a series of faith assumptions. You cannot get around it. What are you saying, Pastor Jeff? Here's what I'm saying. Everybody has a set of exclusive beliefs that you think the rest of the world should conform to. Now, just to show you the point, if you're mad at me right now, and you're thinking, well, I disagree. And you're saying to yourself, you're saying, Pastor Jeff, I think you see things wrongly. Well, if you say that, that means you're saying that I should see things the way you do. Which means that you have a set of exclusive beliefs that you want me to conform to. You can't get around it. Exclusivity is not the issue, folks. It is not. Now, if tolerance is the issue, just let me remind you. Two of the statements for which Jesus is most famous: love your enemies, pray for those who persecute you. You want a peaceful world? Convert everybody to Christ. And those who truly live out authentic and genuine Christianity would never pick up a sword to harm anyone just because they didn't agree with their faith assumptions. Jesus said, the minute you start picking up that sword, you live by it, you'll die by it. The minute you start trying to be offensive and arrogant, and the minute you start trying to convert people by force is the minute you stop following Jesus. It's not an issue of exclusivity. It's an issue of the definition and the nature of truth. Truth, by nature, excludes what is false. If I walk out into this patio and you say, Pastor Jeff, where do you live? And I say, I live in a bungalow. And 2 minutes later, somebody asks me the same question and you hear my answer, only this time I say, I do not live in a bungalow. Both of those statements cannot possibly be true because they fundamentally contradict each other. It's where the law of non-contradiction comes into play that's been around as long as Plato and Aristotle and basic logic. Two statements made about the same thing that diametrically oppose one another cannot both possibly be true. So that's why we say religions that diametrically oppose each other in foundational issues cannot both be true unless we're living in one big loony bin. And if you consider yourself somewhat of a philosopher, I know what you'll say at this point. You'll say, but Pastor Jeff, they can both be false. To which I'll say, yeah, but to know they're false, you'd have to know what the truth is. But Pastor Jeff, someone objects, we cannot know the truth with certainty. And you know how I respond to that. Are you certain that we can't know the truth with certainty? But Pastor Jeff, it's impossible to know anything for sure. And my response is, are you sure it's impossible to know anything for sure? These are self-defeating statements. And the complaint comes back, okay, Pastor Jeff, enough of the philosophy. And I usually say, you started it. They'll say, but you're so arrogant to say that you know the way to God. Now, I want to do this. I've been waiting to do this a long time. Mr. Elephant's going to help us. Here is what happens in 90% of religion classes in the universities in America and philosophy classes. They want to help us understand religion and how we should view it. And here's what this is an example I guarantee is used in 90%. I mean, you've heard it, you can read about it. It's the elephant and the blind man illustration. And they'll say, you got to start to look at religion like 6 blind men who stumble upon an elephant. One blind man comes and he only feels the trunk and he says, wow, elephants are long and they're flexible. Another blind man, he happens to just come around to the back side and he says, no, elephants are flat and expanse. And another blind man comes around and the only thing he feels is the leg. Oh no, elephants are short, strong, and sturdy. Okay? And here's what the religious or the philosophy professor says. See, religion is like 6 blind men who stumble upon the elephant. All of them had part of the truth, but none of them had all of the truth. And that's how religions are in the world. They all have part of the truth, but nobody has all the truth. Now, does anybody in the room see what's wrong with that illustration? You could only know that they had part of the truth if you yourself had all the truth of the elephant. And that's what you're saying nobody has, the whole truth. Now, I know you're a deer caught in headlights right now, and I want to make sure you understand this, so I've written it out slowly. Here's what I'm saying. The only way you could assume that every religion sees only part of the truth is that you see all of the truth, but that's the very thing you say nobody has. Got it? It's a faulty illustration. Also, when somebody comes up to me and says, Pastor Jeff, you should not convert anybody else to your view of religious reality. Do you notice anything about that statement? That is a view of religious reality that you want to convert me to. It's not a question of exclusivity. It's not. It's a question of the issue of truth and the nature of truth that excludes what is false. Now, here's what I want to do. I got a few minutes left. Oh, my goodness, you've got to be kidding me. I got a little bit of time left, but I need your attention. Folks, this is important. I'm not going to spend time, and I would never do this, standing up here criticizing other religions and telling you why I don't think they work. That's not my job. My job is to tell you why I am a Christian. And what is it about Jesus that makes him different than other religious views? That's an important question. And then you have to decide for yourself. Because I think you have enough in the human faculty, if you ask the honest questions, to search for your set of spiritual faith assumptions and to ask the questions of origin, destiny, morality, meaning, all of that, and come to a coherent worldview. I think you're smart enough to do that. We all are. Now, why is it then that I preach Jesus and believe that when Jesus said, I'm the way, truth, and the life, nobody comes to the Father except through me? Why do I believe that? A couple of things I don't have time to talk about, but in case you're in the audience and this is something that serves as a barrier, I want to give you a reading material. The first is this: coherency. It is important for any set of faith assumptions or worldview to be coherent, to be consistent in origin, morality, meaning, and destiny. In other words, I can't say that we're here by accident and then turn around and say, when we die, we go to heaven. That's not coherent. If you want to know more about coherency and why Jesus forces us to look coherency in the eye, and you really want to study other faith systems, then read Dr. Ravi Zacharias' book, recently entitled, Has Christianity Failed You? And read the chapter, Looking Incoherence in the Eye. Now, the other thing is the resurrection. I want you to understand that nobody else claimed to come back from the dead, and if Jesus was who he said he was, he better come back from the dead to back it up. The problem is, many of us don't believe in the resurrection because we don't believe in miracles. But once you assume the existence of God who created time and space, it is not difficult for that same God who created all things to step into time and space and to go against the natural law to perform what we call a miracle. And when you think about the resurrection of Jesus, folks, you have to understand there have been a lot written about the historicity of the resurrection, not some subjective, ooey-gooey feeling of the centrifugal bumble puppy. Don't ask me to explain that. The point I'm trying to make is, read Gary Habermas's book, called the historicity, or not called the historicity of the resurrection, but it deals with the resurrection from a historical point of view, from both objective and circumstantial evidences. What I want to talk about, though, is here is the distinctive mark of Jesus and all other world religions. No other religion has this in common. And you know what it is? Here's the message of Jesus. Religion will not work for you. It won't work. The difference between what Jesus teaches and all other world religions, dominant major world religions, is that they say do, work hard, be holy, be righteous, try really hard. And if you do enough good stuff, by the time you get to the end of your life, you might be accepted before God. And Jesus comes along and says, who you kidding? You're never going to be good enough, ever. Because the standard is not each other. It's not Hitler, Lenin, and Stalin. The standard is the absolute 100% holiness and purity and righteousness of God. And so when I ask people, are you going to heaven? And they say, yes. I say, why? And they'll say, because I'm good enough. And I'll say, in a system or a graph of 0% goodness and 100% goodness, where would you put your name on the line? Without fail. I mean, it's never happened. They always put their name just above the 50% mark. And you know why? Because it's a gospel of morality. They're used to religion that tells you as long as I'm more good than bad, I'll be right with God. And I always remind them that Billy Graham said he put his name at 33%, Mother Teresa 23%. Would you like to change your graph? Because they know something that religious people don't. You can never be accepted by God on the basis of how good you are, because you will never be good enough, because the standard is 100%. So Jesus comes along and says, it's not about that, folks. It's not about that. It's about understanding that if you're here, core of the gospel, and God is here, that there's a gap of your sin that separates you from crossing over to God. And your only hope is not good works. Your only hope to cross over is through the cross. Now, why? Why? Because God is holy and pure and righteous. That's something most religions would agree with. Holy, pure, and righteous. And because of that, he separates himself from that which is unrighteous, which means everybody in the room. I don't know if you know this about me, but I'm a sinner. I don't want to be. I try really hard. But I'm no better than anybody seated in this room. We are all sinners, all of us. I have good days and bad days. But we are all sinners, man, all of us. Jesus says, there's something down inside you that should know that by now. Even when you try really hard, you may have a successful day, but you'll blow it in 10 minutes. But God is holy and pure and righteous, and therefore must separate himself from all known sin. The other part of God, though, is love. And He wants to give us mercy and forgiveness and acceptance. But God cannot meet the requirements of one side of His nature while breaking the other. God's got to meet the requirements of both sides of who He is, ontological essence, who He is, who God is. So what does He do? He sends His Son to die on the cross. So the requirements of God's holiness have been met in that He took all your sins, past, present, future, to this cross and nailed them to the tree. And the requirements of God's love have been met. He didn't require you to pay the penalty. He required His own Son. And no other religion on the planet offers you a cross. And the reason Jesus can say, I am the way, the truth, and the life, and nobody comes to the Father except through me, is because He's the only one that deals with the sin issue. He's the only one that says, I'm going to be the atonement for your sin. I'm going to put you back in a right relationship with God. Not based on how good you are, but what I'm going to do. And I want to say to everyone in the room, what makes Jesus unique is He's the only one that tells you what needed to be done for you to be right with God happened 2,000 years ago on the cross. And all you have this gift from God to reach out and accept and embrace. I love the fact that Jesus, after 400 years of silence between God and His people, wondering if God cared anymore, and Jesus is born into the world. I mean, the virgin birth is a whole other story to talk about. And even the Quran admits that Jesus was born a virgin. That's pretty special. The first thing Jesus says after there's been a silence for 400 years, and out of great respect, I would imagine Jesus like a kid who can't wait to give the good news to everyone. And the very first words out of Jesus' mouth, blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Poor in spirit, the Greek word that means humble. Blessed are the humble, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. That the way to God is not through the arrogance that you think you can be good enough to be accepted. It's by admitting, I can never be what God is. So I ask Him to save me through the cross that pays the penalty for my sin. Here's what Paul says in the book of Romans. For I am not ashamed of the gospel, because it is the power of God. Whose power? Whose power saves you? Yours? No. It is the power of God through the cross to save me. For in it, the gospel, the righteousness of God is revealed. Remember, there are two ways to be righteous. Keep the law perfectly or pay the penalty. That also works in the laws of our land. You can keep the law perfectly, but if you break the law, pay the penalty. And after you've paid the fine, you are considered to be righteous under the law. Paul says, I'm righteous, but not because of my righteousness. I didn't keep the law perfectly, and I didn't pay the penalty. It is the righteousness of God, His provision through the cross. And then he says, a righteousness that is by faith from first to last, just as is written, the righteous will live by faith. Here's what I want to ask. If you're in the room and exclusivity has been a barrier, I want to remind you, it's not a problem of exclusivity. Every faith system and set of assumptions has exclusive points to which they expect everybody else to conform. The issue is truth and the nature of truth. And can I trust Jesus to be telling me the truth? And somebody who rose from the dead and lived a perfect and sinless life is trustworthy. And He says that He's provided the way. And rather than you worrying about everybody else in the world, how about dealing with yourself? How about dealing with what you know and how God has convicted you? And then if you're in this room and you're apart from God and you've been trying to be good to earn God's approval, you're still religious. And Jesus said religion is never going to work for you. What you need is grace through the cross. And that's why Jesus said, I'm the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me, because the cross bridges the gap and crosses over the sin, past, present, future, and puts us in a right relationship. And if you're here in this room, I pray, as we did in our last service and last Saturday night, if you're far from God and you've never embraced the cross, in heaven's name, step across, accept it by faith, and know that Jesus can be trusted, and start your life on an entirely new path. Father, I would pray in the name of Jesus that eyes would have been open. I pray that there would be a special anointing of your Spirit to help us to see things more clearly. Father, the call on our lives as Christians to be people of peace and love, but also to be people who pursue truth. Not arrogance, though, but in calm, loving, salt and light type discussions to share our faith with the world in love, in gratitude, in order that the world may know. I would pray as these movements all around the world continue to just spread like wildfire, acknowledging that the cross of Jesus is the way unto God, that it's still the most recognizable symbol on this planet, that there'd be some in this room who would join the forces, and that the angels in heaven would rejoice today. I pray for your Spirit to fall and for lives to be changed in Jesus' name. Amen.